Sound Speeds. Welcome back to the Sound Speeds podcast, a member of the Geeks Rising podcast community. Let's waste no more time and get right into our content. Call me old if you want to, but one of the things that annoys me a lot when I'm watching modern day movies and TV is creatures that don't sound like they should. We know that you got to understand voices. Speech is part of the story. You have to understand what people are saying. Otherwise, you can't follow the story. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes people, if they have a thick accent, it's sometimes difficult for you to understand them, and you have to turn on subtitles in order to understand what is going on in the plot. And this is something to be expected. If you watch the original Hercules in New York with Arnold Schwarzenegger, they actually ended up ADRing his voice because they couldn't understand Arnold in the very early days of when he first came over from Austria to America.
I'm tired of the same old faces.
I am tired of the same old faces.
Now, I'm not poking at Arnold. We all know that he has a legendary voice. But what I am going to be referring to in this video is whenever you are watching a movie where there is a talking animal or a talking creature or a talking alien or something like that, it drives me insane how whoever the person is in charge of the audio always has perfect diction, perfect like close miking on a large diaphragm condenser, and the creature never sounds at all like they should based on their biology. In the Epic live stream 2022, Mark Mangini came out and he talked about his work on Dune, which he later won an Academy Award for. He's now a 2-time winner. One of the things he said that I thought was completely brilliant was when he was in the pre-production meetings for Dune, some of the questions he was asking is, what is under the sand? What depth under the sand were you, do things become compact because the sandworms have to go through there? What part of its biology pushes through the sand? How does it grind up the sand? He wanted to know about the biology of the animal so he could figure out how it sounds. So that way, when the sandworm pushes through, because this is a big worm and it's got to push through a lot of sand. How does it get through there? This is a big, huge thing. If it was like a little bitty needle and you're pushing through sand, it would sound very different than your hand pushing through, which would sound very different from a big, humongous worm. So he wanted to know how the worm moves, how the worm grinds up whatever is underneath there. He wanted to know all of this in order to accurately portray this, and the result is an absolutely brilliant sound experience when you see Dune. But this is something that is very, very seldomly seen in the world of sound, in post at least. And I'm sure we've seen movies like Men in Black where you have some creature that has a humongous mouth and it's able to speak in perfect diction.
The galaxy is the best source for subatomic energy in the universe. If the bugs get their slimy claws on it, kiss the Archelians goodbye.
And you're able to say, okay, it's an animated creature, we'll suspend disbelief. And that's fine. But when you watch a movie and there's something like a dog that talks and it's speaking perfectly, or a cat or a snake, something that does not have the ability, or even a voice box, like a snake doesn't have a voice box, how in the world is that thing going to be able to speak?
Thanks.
Now, I understand if some of these movies were to take a creative license and make it where it was a little higher pitch. They pitch it up or they pitch it down based on the size. You have a dog that talks. If it's a big dog, it might sound more deep and bassy like a dog bark. And you have a little bitty pipsqueak of a small chihuahua or something like that, it's going to have a high-pitched voice. If you have a polar bear speaking, it's going to have a deeper voice. If you have a snake speaking, it's going to be a little more of a hissy and a high-pitched voice. We understand. You got to understand the dialogue. You got to understand the way things are speaking. And you can, again, say I'm just getting old and getting more frustrated and irritable in my old age. But one of the things that really irritates me is when you're watching one of these movies and the creature doesn't sound like it should. It doesn't need to sound in perfect diction. There is, if you are able to teach a dog how to speak, we've seen those outtakes in America's Funniest Home Videos where a dog sounds like it's saying a word.
I love Mama.
Hello. Hello.
You want it?
But whenever I'm watching a movie, it really irritates me when there is perfect diction, perfect sound, perfect everything coming out of a creature with no voice box, without the ability to use lips to shape a sound. That really irritates me, and I really wish there was some sort of a and you may know of an example of a movie that is able to accurately portray the way a sound the sound of an animal speaking would be. If an animal doesn't have lips, there's no way they're going to be able to shape certain words. You've seen me talk in the past in videos where I've said if you don't have the ability to actually close your lips and you're just talking like this and you don't have any lips, and there's no way you could possibly make certain sounds. Well, this is the way that a lot of lips are on certain animals. A lot of animals don't have the ability to properly speak because you need to be able to move your lips, your tongue, your mouth in general in a certain way to create a certain sound. And this is the same reason why certain people from different countries, they form different words differently, because even from one country to another, where they have certain sounds that they routinely use over and over again, and other sounds they never use at all, this is one of the reasons why some countries are able to perfectly reproduce certain sounds, while people from other countries are like, I can't do that at all. My tongue doesn't do that sound. If, for example, I don't know what it is, but there's an African language that actually uses a click as part of their regular sound. And if you ever listen to them speak, to people from their tribes or their country or whatever speak, it's amazing. To hear how they somehow are able to do a click inside of their speech. And if I try to do it, I have to build like a pause to make a click and then get back into regular speech because it's not part of what I can do. Just like there are some countries that can't pronounce L's. When they come to America and they have a problem with some L's. There are some countries out there, and I'm sure Americans botch, other languages too, in other countries too. Everybody does it because the language that we speak is something that we're familiar with, and we speak it over time. We develop a proficiency in it, and if we don't do certain sounds, we're not going to have the ability to speak them. Animals are the same way, though, and you could argue, well, this animal is 30 years old in this movie. It should be able to speak properly in English. Yes, to a certain degree. But if you have, for example, a cleft lip, it's going to affect the way you sound. If your tongue is misformed, which does happen, sometimes people will have a speech impediment because their tongue is misformed. If someone, just naturally, you could have, stiffer, or you could have had a stroke, for example. We have somebody in our family who had a stroke years ago, and that person lost the ability to speak, to move one side of their face. Well, that drastically affected her ability to speak. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes down to certain people and creatures and, just sounds in general. We need to have a better understanding, especially in post, as to how something should sound, where it's still going to be legible. We're still going to be able to understand what people are saying. But there's got to be some realism, in my opinion, when it comes down to something speaking English or in any language in a way that we could actually understand it. We have to be able to understand the voice, yes, but there should be some realism as to what kind of muscles that they're used to actually speak. What kind of, do they have a voice box? If not, for example, a snake. If we're talking about a snake, could a snake, like Harry Potter, when they do the parcel mouth, it's more of just a hiss, high pitch, but you still hear lips making and shaping certain sounds.
Thanks.
But if we were to have a snake speak in a movie, it doesn't have the ability to move its lips or mouth or whatever. So perhaps it could just be a constant hiss with certain variations, but within a certain limited frequency range because it's still hissing. There's no voice box, or maybe there is a voice box. I don't know snake biology, but what my point here is that I would really love to see more creatures in movies that speak the way that they should based on their own biology. It's not me. We're not trying to make something unintelligible or something that you just cannot understand the way they speak, but it would be really nice to have a movie or some movies out there that have a creature that has the ability to speak the way that their biology dictates. And I really wish that we would have that. There are some actors that come to set and they're able to flip on and flip off their character when they say action and cut. And this is something that quite commonly the way that actors are on set. They'll come to set, they'll introduce you as whatever their name is. Then when they say action, they will jump into character, or maybe they even get into character before the scene starts. And before they get there, they get on set and they start getting in character or whatever. But when they say action, the character starts. Some actors will just pretend to be an actor or pretend to be their character, and they're not really immersed in it. It doesn't really necessarily be something that's totally different from their actual person, so they will more act like themselves. This is where you come up with character actors and method actors. Some characters they'll act like a certain character all the time, and sometimes those characters happen to be the way their personality actually is in real life. But there are some people who are method actors, and the story that I'm about to tell is about one method actor I worked with who is completely brilliant, especially in the way that he handled things on set. On the movie The Last of Robin Hood, Kevin Kline played Errol Flynn, and he played him from a young era Errol Flynn to an older era of Errol Flynn. Now, some method actors, they will have a certain routine that they will use to get into their character. When they go to their trailer and they get into their wardrobe, there may be a certain routine that they get into in order to find that character for them. It could be that they have a certain, like if they're doing a movie that's based in the 40s, they could have a breakfast every single morning where part of their morning routine is to have this breakfast, and that puts them in the mindset of their 40s character. I don't know the process Kevin Kline goes through, but I can tell you it's absolutely brilliant, because when he came to set for the first day on The Last of Robin Hood as Errol Flynn, he was in character, introduced himself as Errol. We all knew he was going to be Errol anyway, but he introduced himself and he was in character the entire time. Didn't matter when you said rolling, when you said cut, whatever, he was always Errol. And even when, to give you an idea of how in-depth his character was, he had started prepping for it months in advance. And even after his last shot, when we were wrapping the movie, when they said, and that's a wrap on The Last of Robin Hood, and they wrapped, he was still working on his Errol Flynn-ness, his Errol Flynn voice, his mannerisms, even when he was going around and thanking people and on set. He was still Errol Flynn. You could have said that as soon as they said that's a wrap, instantly drop it and that's it. I've worked with other people who have who come to set, for example, as a particular character. They're a British actor or actress. They come to set. They have to have their American accent as soon as they start their day. Otherwise, it's going to slip and they're going to go back into their British accent, and they don't want to run the risk of that happening. So they never, ever break from having their English accent completely repressed and replaced with their American accent when they're on set. But only if they come to set on non-working days, you're like, whoa, that's your real voice. I never knew that. Or some characters, as soon as they say that's a wrap on this show or this season, whatever, that's when they'll suddenly say, okay, this is my real voice. I just couldn't, it would totally throw me off in my American voice if I were to use my real voice. But Errol, he was brilliant. Now, the story I'm about to tell you here is about the very first day on set when he came to set. We were, obviously the sound department makes recommendations. So if there is a sound we hear, we will do our best to try to eliminate it. Now, the sound that we were hearing on set was, Errol was coming to set and he was telling us, telling everybody, some other actors, a story of, from set, as Errol Flynn. And so it happened to be, I think, a cowboy shot, which was like, from just above the knee upwards, but he was standing in front of a fireplace and we really weren't seeing the flames. But in case we were to see a little waver or something like that from the top of the heat, the fireplace wanted to be lit. The director wanted it to be lit, and they'd kind of planned on it being that way. Now on set, you don't just light a fireplace that's a gas fire and, throw wood in there. You don't really do that. You have to run hoses, and there's effects people that are in charge of this. And so there was hoses that went in there causing a hiss. When you turn it on, there's a hiss and then it makes the flame go. Now, this is something that usually ends up happening anytime we have a similar type setup on set. You're going to hear a little bit of a hiss. It's the nature of it, right? But the thing was, we were observing. And one of the things I did on set was I tried to find out what the shots were going to be. And it was always going to be like a close-up and this cowboy at the same time where we really didn't see the top of the fireplace. And I went to the director and I tried to go into and talk to him and said, we're not really seeing the flames, are we? Because I'm not able to see it with my eye. Are you able to see it? And he's like, not really. I think that we should have it just in case we go wide or in case we catch a piece of a flame or something like that. Fine. You know what? It's a director's call, but still, we were still hearing it. And it was one of those things that to the sound department, we're just like, it would be so awesome if it went away. All you could do in the sound department is make a recommendation of a certain sound, of a certain sound related concern. And the director could make that call. No problem. He was actually a brilliant director. I liked him working with him. But my point here, and where I'm going with this story, is that when Errol came to set, he looked at the shot He looked at everything, and then he said, "Are we seeing the fire?" And people were just like, "Well, we might see a piece of it." He's like, "I don't see it. I don't even see it with my eyes." And they're like, "Well," he's like, but in the same time, we're hearing it." And they were like, "Okay, well, okay, that's fine. If we don't see it." And then they came to set and said, "Yeah, you're right. We don't really see it at all." But they wanted it in case it was a piece of it. But they were just like, "Yeah, you're right." And so it's one of those things where for an actor, they'll address something a little differently than they will for the sound department. And again, it was a great experience working on this movie. And it was one of those calls where the director made the call, and it was a great call as far as the sound department was concerned, because we didn't have to hear it anymore. But it was really cool to know that even as he came to set, a method actor playing another actor, even in a modern era where, there's a gas fireplace, he still in character was able to address the sound in a certain way. I don't remember the exact way he did it, but he addressed it. He was like, "I don't see the fire with my eyes, but I'm hearing it." And I can't remember the exact way he did it, but it was brilliant, in character, and it was able to convey exactly what he wanted to the director, who was like, "You're right. We don't see it." And when I addressed the director, he was just like, "In case we see it." And that's fine. Again, directors will like to have a piece of something in there if there's a chance. If you work on a movie and there's electricity or something like that, they may say, "Let's see if we can get a spark," or something like that. By the rigging of the sparks and stuff like that the effects department's done. Sometimes on the chance, let's see if we can do that. And after a few takes, they may say, "Okay, we weren't able to." But in this circumstance, they wanted it just in case it was a piece of the flame scene, but it wasn't going to be that way. And when Errol mentioned it, the director was like, "You know what? You're right." And it was just, I love it when actors address things on set that reinforces what our sound concerns are. Again, there was no wrong, right, or whatever. It was just the sound department saying it would be best for sound, and it would be so ideal. And we even tried working with the effects person. Is there a way for you to turn it up enough where you could maybe see a flame, but not have it be as loud? Or is there a way to make it quieter, but still have the same effect? And there really wasn't. So this worked out great. Absolutely love this story. I've told it to a bunch of my classes, because it's a situation where an actor came to set, had our back, but by also having his own performance not be affected by, I guess, in case the hiss was throwing him off or giving him something to think about. I'm not exactly sure, but what I am sure about is that it sounded so much better when the fire was just turned all the way off. So there you have it, another episode of the Soundspeeds podcast, complete, in the can. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in another couple of weeks with another episode of the Soundspeeds podcast. Take care. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.